There is an ancient stillness that lives within you, waiting beneath the noise of your day. It is a quietness that is not an absence of sound, but a presence of peace. It is the deep, undisturbed water at the bottom of a lake, even while the surface is churned by wind and rain. For most, this inner sanctuary remains a forgotten country, a rumor heard in the moments just before sleep, or in the vast silence of a natural landscape. The modern world is a masterful architect of distraction, building walls of noise brick by brick around this quiet center. The hum is constant, a low-frequency vibration that sings from the glowing rectangles we carry. It's the phantom buzz in a pocket, the endless scroll that promises connection, but often delivers comparison. The ceaseless chorus of opinions that demand to be heard, sorted, and judged. The mind becomes a marketplace at midday, filled with shouting merchants of anxiety, hawking yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's fears. A person can sit in a perfectly quiet room and yet hear a symphony of chaos within their own skull. The mind, designed to be a tool, becomes the master, replaying conversations, rehearsing arguments, and casting judgment on every thought that arises. It becomes a ghost, haunting the house of the body with its restlessness. You have felt this. You have known the exhaustion that comes not from physical labor, but from the relentless internal spinning of the wheel. It is the feeling of being perpetually braced for an impact that never comes, the subtle clenching of the jaw, the shallow breath held in the chest. This is the state of reaction. It is the default setting of a nervous system trained by evolution and society to scan for threats, to solve, to fix, to control. An email arrives with a certain tone and the body tightens. A comment is made, a look is given, and a story is instantly written. A story of threat, of lack, of injustice. The string is pulled and the puppet dances. The external world plays a tune and the inner world falls into step without question. This dance is suffering. It is the belief that your peace is a fragile thing, held captive by circumstance, dependent on the approval of others, the success of a project, the health of a loved one. It is the outsourcing of your own well-being. But what if this were all based on a profound misunderstanding? What if the peace you are searching for is not found by adding anything at all? Not one more achievement, one more possession, one more relationship. What if it is found not by winning the argument or controlling the outcome, but by learning to simply not react? This is not a call to become passive or unfeeling. The power of non-reaction is not numbness. It is the highest form of intelligence, the most potent form of action. It is the wisdom to create a space between a stimulus and your response. In that space lies your freedom. It is the quiet moment of observation where you see the spark but choose not to pour gasoline on it. It is the recognition that the angry driver, the critical colleague, the anxious thought, they are all phenomena passing through the landscape of your awareness. They are the weather. They are not you. You are the sky that holds the weather. The sky does not fight the storm clouds. It allows them to gather, to rain, and to pass, remaining unchanged, vast, and clear. Within you is that same vastness. This journey we are embarking on tonight is a journey to that sky within. It is a path of unlearning, of letting go, of remembering the stillness that has been there all along. It is an exploration of the ancient arts of observation, acceptance, and release, woven with the threads of modern understanding of the mind and its habits. It is an invitation to put down the heavy burden of constant reaction and to rest in the quiet strength of your own unshakable presence. So, find your comfortable space. Let the outer world fade and allow this journey to begin. The journey begins not on a road or a path, but in the vast and silent landscape of awareness itself. Picture a young monk, his robe still new, his mind a turbulent sea of ambition and grievance. He felt the world was a harsh and unyielding place, that others were dismissive, that his efforts went unseen. His prayers were filled with the subtle complaint of the soul that feels wronged. One morning, his master, a man whose silence contained more wisdom than 1,000 books, simply pointed to a distant mountain pass. "Go to the valley beyond that ridge," he said, "and listen." The young monk, believing this to be a test of his endurance, walked for a day and a night. He arrived in a colossal amphitheater of stone, a valley so deep and quiet it seemed to hold its breath. A profound loneliness washed over him, and with it the familiar sting of his own frustration. He felt small and ignored by the grand, indifferent cliffs. In a fit of pique, he cupped his hands to his mouth and shouted into the abyss, "I hate you." Immediately, from every direction, the valley roared back, "I hate you." He was startled. He listened, his heart pounding. Then, with more anger, he screamed, "You are a coward." And the rocks echoed with the force of his own judgment. "You are a coward." Convinced that some malevolent hermit was living in the caves, mocking him, he returned to the monastery, his mind even more agitated than before. He told the master of the cruel man who lived in the valley. The master listened without expression, then handed the young monk a flask of water. "Go back," he said gently, "and this time, shout only what you wish to hear." The monk returned, full of doubt, but the master's calm was infectious. He stood at the same precipice, the cool mountain air on his face. He took a breath, and with a voice trembling with uncertainty, he called out, "I love you." A moment of silence passed, and then, from the heart of the stone, a gentle chorus returned. "I love you." Tears welled in his eyes. He felt a lifetime of hardness begin to crack. He smiled and shouted with all his might, "You are beautiful." And the valley, now a friend, sang back to him, "You are beautiful." In that moment, he understood. The valley had no opinion. It held no love, no malice. It was a perfect, impartial mirror, returning to him with absolute fidelity the energy he had first offered. He was not arguing with a cruel man. He was arguing with himself. This is the great secret of non-reaction. Life, in its essence, is that valley. It is an echoing chamber. The mind in its unobserved state believes it is a victim of the echoes it receives. It is constantly reporting on the cruel man hiding in the rocks. It points to the external event, the critical comment, the missed opportunity, the traffic jam as the source of its disturbance. But it rarely questions the initial shout. That shout is a projection. It is the unconscious broadcasting of one's own inner state onto the blank screen of the world. A mind conditioned by fear will see threat everywhere. It will interpret a neutral question as an interrogation and a simple silence as a sign of rejection. A person carrying a deep well of unworthiness does not hear feedback. They hear confirmation of their own deepest fear, that they are not enough. The ego does this mechanically. Its primary function is to preserve its own story, its own identity. And if that identity is built on a foundation of grievance or anxiety, it will work tirelessly to find evidence in the world to prove its story is true. It shouts, "The world is unfair," and then selectively listens for the echoes of injustice to validate its position. This is how cycles of suffering are born and sustained. You have stood in this valley many times. Think of the last time you felt a surge of anger or defensiveness from a digital message. The words on the screen were merely black pixels. They had no inherent power. The power, the shout, came from within you. Perhaps the shout was, "I am being disrespected." And so the echo you experienced was a day filled with the feeling of disrespect. Replaying the words, crafting a reply, the body tight with a sense of battle. What if the initial shout had been different? What if, in the space before the reaction, you had chosen to shout, "I will seek to understand," or even, "This has nothing to do with me"? The entire emotional landscape of your day would have been transformed. The echo would have been one of curiosity, or even freedom instead of conflict. The practice of non-reaction, then, is the practice of becoming exquisitely aware of your own shout, of catching the intention before it solidifies into a word or a deed, and asking a simple question. Is this what I truly wish to hear echoed back into my life? To become aware of your own shout is to meet the shouter. It is to come face to face with the part of you that feels so exquisitely sensitive, so easily bruised, the part that takes everything personally. This is the ego, not some enemy to be destroyed, but a simple, persistent misunderstanding of who you are. Its nature is revealed in a timeless story. A man was crossing a river in his small boat. It was a misty evening. The water was like dark glass, and the world was hushed. He was a scholar, a meditator, and he was enjoying the profound peace of the moment, feeling at one with the gentle current. Suddenly, with a jarring thud, another boat struck his own, nearly throwing him into the water. His serenity shattered in an instant. A hot surge of anger flooded his body. Who could be so careless, so idiotic, as to navigate so recklessly in this thick mist? He turned, his mouth open, a torrent of furious words ready to erupt. And then he saw it. The other boat was empty. It had simply broken loose from its moorings upstream and was drifting silently with the river's flow. There was no one to blame. There was no one to shout at. There was no one to receive his anger, and in that moment his rage, having no target, simply collapsed. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the gentle lapping of the water against the two boats. He bowed his head and smiled. He had been ready to make war with an empty boat. This is the great teaching. The world is filled with empty boats. The events that disturb your peace, the moments that trigger your deepest reactivity, are very often just empty boats drifting on the currents of causality with no intention toward you at all. But the ego, the I, that feels itself to be the permanent, solid resident of your body and mind, cannot accept this. It is a ghost that believes it is a king. It thrives on being a target, because being a target proves that it exists, that it is significant. When the empty boat bumps into it, the ego instantly populates it with a villain. It projects a careless, malicious, or incompetent captain onto the empty seat, and then launches its righteous attack. The anger feels justified, the grievance feels real, because the ego has created a perpetrator to validate its own sense of being a victim. It is a story manufactured in a split second, and it is the source of nearly all human conflict. Consider the person who cuts you off in traffic. The collision of your worlds is real, but the story you tell about it is a choice. The ego instantly assumes that person is selfish. They disrespected me. They put me in danger. The boat is now filled with a terrible person. But what if the boat is empty? What if the driver is a panicked father rushing to his child's school, his mind completely absorbed by a phone call from the nurse? What if she is a new driver, terrified and clumsy on a busy highway? The action is not about you. It is a reflection of their journey, their story. The boat is empty of any malice towards you. You experience these empty boats all day long. Your life is this river in the mist. A colleague speaks brusquely in a meeting, and the ego immediately feels the bump. I am being undermined, it declares. The boat is now filled with a political rival. But what if that colleague's boat is empty? What if they were up all night with a sick parent, and their mind is simply not present? Their words clipped by exhaustion and worry. The event is impersonal. The friend doesn't respond to your text message for hours, and the ego feels the cold chill of being ignored. They don't value me, it whispers. The boat is filled with a neglectful friend. But what if the boat is empty? What if their phone died, or they are navigating a difficult conversation with their partner, or they have simply fallen into a deep and needed sleep? To see the empty boat is not to become a doormat or to excuse genuinely harmful behavior. It is a tool for your own liberation. It is the wisdom to stop poisoning yourself with anger that has no real target. It is the profound relief of unhooking your well-being from the perceived intentions of others. The practice, then, becomes a quiet, internal question in the moment of impact. Is this boat truly aimed at me, or is it empty? In asking, you create a sacred pause. You stop the instant manufacturing of a villain. You allow for the possibility that you are not the center of another's story. You empty your own boat of the heavy cargo of indignation, and in doing so, you find you can navigate the river with a lighter heart, undisturbed by the inevitable, impersonal bumps along the way. To see the empty boats of the world is to find a measure of peace, but there is another river, one that flows more ceaselessly, closer to home. It is the river of the mind, and on its surface 1,000 boats, memories, plans, judgments and fears bump into each other day and night. The greatest source of human disturbance is not the external collision, but the internal chaos of this endless stream. A young monk tasked with sitting in silence found himself in a state of torment. He went to his master. "I cannot meditate," he said. "The more I try to be quiet, the louder my thoughts become. They are like a swarm of angry bees." The master led him from the meditation hall down to a swift-flowing river at the edge of the monastery grounds. "Your task for the day," the master said, his voice calm as stone, "is to stop this river." The young monk was stunned, but he was obedient. First, he waded into the cold water and tried to build a dam with heavy rocks, but the powerful current simply pushed them aside. He tried to stand against the flow, a human barrier, but he was quickly knocked off his feet. He spent hours in exhausting, fruitless labor, until he finally collapsed on the bank, soaking wet and defeated. The master, who had been watching from beneath a tree, came and sat beside him. "You cannot stop the river," he said, stating the obvious with gentle kindness. "And you cannot stop the flow of thoughts in your mind. Your mistake was in believing that was the goal." The master pointed a finger toward the water. "Look, a yellow leaf, and there, a small twig, now a fallen blossom. They appear, they float by, and they vanish downstream. They are not the river, and the river is not them. Your work is not to fight the current, it is to sit on the bank and watch." This is the art of watching the river of thoughts. The mind thinks. That is its nature. To expect the mind to be silent is like expecting the heart to stop beating. The struggle, the agitation, the feeling of being at war with yourself, all arise from the futile attempt to dam the river. Peace is not found in an empty mind. Peace is found in a new relationship with the mind. It is the profound shift from being a passenger tossed about in the water to being the calm, unshakable witness sitting on the bank. This witness is the essence of your awareness. It is the part of you that knows you are thinking, just as it knows you are breathing. It is the silent, spacious background against which all the activity of your life unfolds. Thoughts, emotions, and sensations are the objects that float by on the river. They are not you. You are the space that allows them to be. When you believe you are your thoughts, you are swept into the current. A thought of sadness arises, and you say, "I am sad." You have jumped into the water and become one with that particular piece of driftwood. A thought of anger appears, and you say, "I am angry." Now you are caught in a whirlpool, spinning in the story of that anger. The practice of sitting on the bank is the practice of non-identification. When the sad thought appears, the witness simply notes, sadness is floating by. When the angry thought comes, the witness observes, here is anger passing through. There is no judgment, no attempt to push it away or cling to it. There is only a clear, calm seeing. The leaf is just a leaf. The thought is just a thought. It is a transient flicker of mental energy, a cloud passing through the vast sky of your consciousness. You have spent a lifetime in the river. Think of the anxious mind, how it races downstream toward a future that has not yet happened. It creates elaborate stories of failure and catastrophe, and your body reacts as if these stories are real, flooding with cortisol, the heart beating faster. This is being swept away by the current of fear. The practice is to sit on the bank of this present moment and watch the fearful thoughts float by, labeling them. This is a thought about what might happen. Future leaf. You do not have to board that leaf and travel to the land of imagined disaster. You can let it go. Think of the ruminating mind, how it gets stuck in a whirlpool, circling the same past event again and again. A mistake, a regret, a hurt. This is being trapped by the debris of yesterday. The practice is to notice the circling and gently guide your attention back to the bank, acknowledging the memory thought without getting back into the water with it. Yes, that happened, and here I am, now, breathing on the shore. This is not about suppression, it is about perspective. You are not the dramas playing out on the water's surface. You are the deep, quiet, unwavering presence on the bank. From this vantage point, you have freedom, you have choice. You can finally see that the most frantic, terrifying, or self-critical thoughts are just leaves, and you can simply let them float on by. Among the driftwood that floats on the river of the mind, some pieces are particularly heavy. They are the thoughts of our own imperfection, the memories of failure, the sharp-edged shards of shame. We spend so much of our lives trying to push these pieces under the surface, hoping they will sink, pretending they are not there. We believe that peace lies in achieving a state of flawless, unbroken perfection. But the wisdom of the ages offers a more compassionate and more beautiful path. There was once a great tea master, renowned throughout the land for his serene presence. His most treasured possession was not an ornate scroll or a golden statue, but a simple, rustic teacup, perfectly imperfect in its form. One day, a young disciple, nervous in the master's presence, was cleaning the tea room. His sleeve caught the cup, sending it tumbling to the stone floor where it shattered. The disciple was overcome with terror and shame. He gathered the broken pieces, hid them away, and fell into a state of deep despair, certain he would be banished from the monastery forever. The master soon discovered what had happened, but he said nothing. He did not scold the boy. He simply found the hidden pieces and took them to his workshop. Weeks went by. Then, one morning, the master invited the heartbroken disciple to join him for tea. The disciple entered the room with his head bowed, ready to accept his punishment. The master gestured for him to sit, and then he poured the tea, serving the young man with the very same cup. The disciple stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. The cup was whole again, but it was not the same. The jagged lines where it had been broken were not concealed. Instead, they were filled with a fine lacquer mixed with pure gold. The dark ceramic was now traced with shimmering golden rivers. The cup's history, its moment of shattering, was not a hidden scar, but its most striking feature. It was more beautiful now, more breathtaking for having been broken. "Do not be ashamed," the master said softly. "The world breaks everyone. It is in the mending that we become strong, and it is in honoring the cracks that we become beautiful." This is the art of kintsugi, or golden repair. It is a philosophy that sees breakage and repair as a vital part of an object's life, not the end of it. In a world that worships youth, flawlessness, and the appearance of effortless perfection, kintsugi is a radical act of grace. It teaches that the journey of a thing or a person is written in its scars. The cracks are not a sign of diminished value, but of a history, of survival, of a story worth telling. This is the profound truth of your own life. The mind is conditioned to see its breaks as shameful, The failure in business, the end of a marriage, the period of deep depression, the awkwardness in social situations, the anxiety that churns in the stomach. The ego labels these as evidence of being flawed, as proof of being less than. We are taught to apply emotional makeup, to present a smooth surface to the world, to hide the lines of our past suffering. But it is precisely in those lines that our greatest beauty resides.
A life without cracks is a life that has not been truly lived. It is a cup kept in a cabinet, never used for fear it might chip. The breaks are evidence that you have dared to live, to love, to risk, to feel. And the gold? The gold is the wisdom you earned from the failure. It is the compassion for others that was born from your own heartbreak. It is the resilience forged in the fires of your darkest nights. It is the empathy that flows from you precisely because you know the landscape of pain. You have been taught to hate your cracks, but they are the source of your light. Think of the filtered perfection of the modern world, the endless parade of flawless lives presented on glowing screens. This creates an illusion that you are the only one with a shattered cup. And so you hide your pieces, feeling deeply alone in your brokenness. The wisdom of Kintsugi invites you to stop. It asks you to have the courage to see that your scars are not deformities. They are inscriptions of strength. That past trauma is not a life sentence of being damaged goods. It is the fault line where a unique and precious vein of gold has been laid. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a crack that lets the light in and out. Your history of mistakes is not a source of shame. It is a rich golden pattern that makes your soul unlike any other. The practice, then, is one of radical self-compassion. It is to look upon the parts of yourself you have rejected and to begin the process of golden repair. It is to trace the lines of old wounds not with judgment, but with the gentle lacquer of acceptance. It is to understand that wholeness is not the absence of brokenness. Wholeness is the courageous and beautiful act of integrating all of your pieces. To honor the cracks is the beginning of wisdom. It is the compassionate acceptance of what has been. The next step on this journey is to learn how to actively cultivate the soil from which your present and future will grow. This is the art of tending the inner garden. Imagine two plots of land, side by side. They are given the same soil, the same amount of sun, the same measure of rain. On the first plot, a man toils, his face a permanent mask of frustration. When the sun beats down too hard, he curses it for scorching his seedlings. When an unexpected rainstorm arrives, he shakes his fist at the sky for drowning his plants. He spends his mornings worrying about pests, his afternoons complaining about weeds he has not pulled, and his evenings in anxious dread of the next day's weather. His energy is spent entirely in a futile argument with reality. His garden, neglected, is a testament to his struggle, thin, withered, and choked by weeds. On the plot of land next to him, a woman works in quiet diligence. She accepts the sun as a given, and on the hottest days she builds simple shades for her most delicate plants. She sees the rain not as a personal affront, but as a force of nature, and she digs channels to direct the excess water. She treats the weeds and pests not as enemies, but as a simple fact of gardening, and she patiently removes them day by day. Her focus is never on the sky above, but always on the soil beneath her feet and the plants within her reach. Her garden, as a result,
is a flourishing oasis of life and colour. The difference between the two gardens was never the external conditions.
The difference was where each gardener chose to place their power.
This simple story illustrates the most practical and liberating of all ancient philosophies, a cornerstone of Stoic wisdom. It is the clear-seeing recognition that the universe is divided into two parts, that which is within your control and that which is not. All human suffering, without exception, arises from a confusion between these two. The things you cannot control are the weather, the economy, the aging of your body, the past, and, most importantly, what other people think, say, and do. To waste a single drop of life's energy trying to command these things is the work of the first gardener. It is to shout at the rain. It is to guarantee your own misery. The things that are absolutely within your control are far fewer, but they are infinitely more powerful. They are your beliefs, your judgments, your intentions, and your responses. This is your garden. This small patch of earth is the only place in the entire cosmos where your will is sovereign.
The person who finds peace and builds a life of meaning is the one who learns to relentlessly distinguish between these two domains, and then dedicates all of their energy to cultivating their own small plot. This is not a philosophy of passive resignation. It is the ultimate strategy for an effective and tranquil life. It is the release of the crushing burden of trying to manage the entire world, and the joyful acceptance of the power you have to manage yourself. Your mind is this garden. Your attention is the sun and water that you pour upon it. Every day you are making a choice. Are you watering the weeds of anxiety by endlessly scrolling through news of world events you cannot influence? That is the first gardener's path. The second gardener's path is to stay informed, but to then bring the attention back home, asking, what is the single, compassionate action I can take in my own life today? Are you letting your inner peace be scorched by the heat of another person's anger or opinion? Or are you tending to your own response, cultivating the shade of equanimity and non-reaction? When you worry about what your boss thinks of you, you are trying to control the weather in their mind. The wise gardener turns their attention away from that impossible task and focuses instead on the quality of their own work, on the integrity of their own effort. When you are caught in a loop of regret, you are trying to change the weather of yesterday. The wise gardener lets the past be and uses its lessons as compost to enrich the soil of the present moment. The practice is a constant, gentle returning. You will feel the pull to worry about the uncontrollable. The mind is conditioned to do so. Your work is simply to notice this, and with the kindness of the second gardener, to bring your attention back to your breath, back to the choice you can make in this very second, back to the small patch of earth that is yours and yours alone to tend. Here, in this inner garden, you can always cultivate peace, no matter what storms rage outside the gate. In every garden, no matter how well tended, there is a corner that lies in shadow. It is the place where the things we do not wish to see are allowed to grow, the part of ourselves we turn our back on. We spend our lives focusing on the sunlit flowers of our virtues, while pretending this dark corner does not exist. Yet, it is from this very shadow that the most troublesome weeds snake their way into the rest of the garden, choking the life we so carefully cultivate. An ancient parable speaks of a man who was driven to madness by his own shadow.
He despised it. He saw it as a dark, mocking specter that mimicked his every move. He became determined to escape it. So, he began to run. He ran across open plains, but the shadow effortlessly kept pace. Convinced he was not running fast enough, he quickened his stride, pushing his body to its limits, his heart pounding, his lungs burning. But the faster he ran, the more faithfully the shadow stuck to him. He never rested, never paused, for fear the creature would catch him. Finally, having exhausted his life force in this frantic, impossible flight, he collapsed and died. The parable ends with a simple, tragic observation. If he had only walked to the shade of a large tree and sat down to rest, his shadow would have instantly vanished.
This man is a portrait of the human ego in its flight from itself. The shadow he feared is a real and powerful force within every person. It is the unconscious container for all the parts of yourself that you have disowned. As a child, you learned very quickly which aspects of your personality were acceptable and which were not. The parts that earned you praise, perhaps being quiet, agreeable, or hard-working, became the sunlit face you present to the world. But the parts that earned you disapproval, your anger, your vulnerability, your ambition, your wildness, your sadness, were deemed unworthy. And so, you pushed them down, exiled them to the darkness of the unconscious. This is your shadow. But these exiled parts do not die. They live and breathe in the darkness, gathering strength. The more you pretend they do not exist, the more they control you from behind the stage of your conscious mind. The man who has disowned his anger, striving always to be the nice guy, will find it leaking out in sarcasm, passive aggression, or sudden, inexplicable rages over trivial things. The woman who has exiled her own vulnerability, building a fortress of fierce independence, will find herself unable to form deep connections, judging others as weak and needy. These are the whispers of the shadow, the roots of self-sabotage. And most powerfully, what we refuse to see in ourselves, we project onto the world around us. The shadow is the ink we use to paint the villains in our lives. The arrogance you despise in a colleague is very often a reflection of your own disowned ambition. The laziness you judge in another is a mirror for the part of you that is crying out for rest. The intense, visceral reaction you have to another person's behavior is a powerful clue that you are not seeing them clearly. You are seeing a lost piece of yourself. You carry a lantern, the light of your conscious awareness, and everywhere you go, a shadow falls behind you. The spiritual journey is not about trying to create a life of pure light, which is impossible. It is about having the courage to stop running, to turn around, and to face the shadow you cast. This is the meaning of shadow work. It is the brave and healing process of looking into that dark corner of the garden and asking, what lives here? It is to look at the people who trigger you the most and ask, what part of myself am I seeing in them? The practice is not to become the shadow, not to indulge in rage or cruelty. The practice is integration. It is to own the capacity for these things within yourself. It is to say, without shame, yes, a part of me is angry. A part of me is weak. A part of me is selfish. The moment you can own these traits, they cease to control you. By admitting your anger, you can learn to use its energy constructively. By acknowledging your vulnerability, you can finally allow for genuine connection.
By facing the shadow, you take back the power you have given it. You stop running, you walk calmly to the shade of the tree, and you sit down. You realize the thing that was pursuing you was never an enemy. It was just a wounded, abandoned part of your own beautiful, complex and whole self, begging to be brought back home. To face the shadow is to begin the sacred work of unpacking the burdens you have carried for a lifetime. It is to acknowledge the heavy stones of anger, grief, and fear you carry in your pack. But how exactly is this weight carried? And what is the secret to finally setting it down? The nature of this burden is best understood through a simple, modern story. A professor teaching a class on stress management walked onto the stage. She said nothing, but simply picked up a glass of water from her lectern and held it up for all to see. A slow smile crossed her face as she asked the students, "How heavy do you think this glass of water is?" The students called out their guesses. 8 ounces, 12 ounces, maybe a pound. After a few moments, she shook her head gently. "The absolute weight of this glass is irrelevant," she said, her voice becoming soft and clear. "The perceived weight depends entirely on how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute, it's quite light. If I hold it for an hour, my arm will begin to ache with a dull, persistent pain. If I try to hold it for an entire day, my arm will likely cramp up and feel completely numb and paralyzed. In each case, the physical weight of the glass did not change. But the longer I held on to it, the heavier and more unbearable it became." A silence fell over the room as the students grasped the truth of her words. She placed the glass back on the lectern. "Your worries, your resentments, your regrets," she said, "they are all like this glass of water. Think about them for a few minutes, and they seem manageable. Dwell on them for a few hours, and they begin to hurt. Carry them with you all day, every day, and you will eventually feel paralyzed, incapable of doing anything else." This is the mechanism of suffering. The mind, in its unobserved state, believes that by constantly holding on to a problem, by endlessly thinking about it, it is somehow working toward a solution. It picks up the glass of a past mistake and examines it from every angle, hour after hour. It holds up the glass of a future worry and stares into it, trying to predict every possible outcome. It grips the heavy glass of a grudge, believing that the tightness of its grip is a measure of its righteousness. But this constant holding does not solve the problem. It only exhausts the holder. The initial event is the water in the glass, but the suffering, the real pain, is the ache in the arm. The great liberation taught by the wise is this: the solution is not to change the water, the solution is to put down the glass. Putting down the glass does not mean the problem ceases to exist, just as the water is still on the lectern. It is an act of wisdom, a recognition that your resources are finite. It is the compassionate decision to give your arm a rest, to allow your nervous system to recover, so that when you do choose to address the problem, you can do so from a place of strength, not from a place of pained, numb exhaustion. Your arms are tired. You have been holding so many glasses for so long that you may have forgotten what it feels like to have your hands free. There is the glass of a family grudge, an old wound from a parent or sibling that you pick up and hold every time their name is mentioned. You have held it for so long, the ache feels normal. Can you imagine, just for tonight, placing that glass on the table? You do not have to resolve the issue or offer forgiveness. You only have to give yourself a rest from the weight of carrying it. There is the glass of professional failure, that project that went wrong, that opportunity you missed. It is filled with the bitter water of if only. Its weight has made you cautious and afraid to try again. The practice is to see that the event is over. The glass belongs to the past. By setting it down in the present, you free your hands to build a different future. And then there is the glass of anxiety, filled to the brim with tomorrow's worries. You hold it beside you in bed, and it steals your sleep. The wisdom here is so simple. Remember to put the glass down before you close your eyes. Whatever the worry is, it can be picked up again in the morning if needed. But for the night, your only job is to rest. Your strength is not measured by how much you can carry. It is measured by your wisdom to know when to let go. So right now, feel the weight of whatever glass you are holding. Acknowledge its presence. And then, with a slow, conscious breath, imagine yourself opening your hand and gently, deliberately placing it on a solid surface beside you. Feel the immediate relief. Feel the lightness returning to your arm. This freedom is always available to you. All you have to do is remember to put down the glass. The wisdom of putting down the glass is the wisdom of subtraction. It is the profound understanding that peace is found not by adding anything new to your life, but by ceasing to add your own layer of resistance to what is already so. This recognition is not new. It is the heart of one of the oldest and most penetrating teachings on the nature of human experience, a lesson known as the 2 arrows. The story is told of a person walking through the world. Inevitably, they are struck by an arrow. It comes from an unseen source, a part of the landscape of life itself. The feeling is sharp, immediate, and real. This is pain. The Buddha taught that this first arrow is an unavoidable part of existence. To be born into a human body is to be subject to sickness, old age, and death. To have a human heart is to be subject to loss, disappointment, and betrayal. These are the first arrows. No amount of striving, wealth, or good fortune can build a fortress that will keep them out forever. But then the story takes a turn. The average person struck by this first arrow does something that seems insane. In their anger, fear, and confusion, they take out a second arrow and deliberately stab themselves with it in the very same wound. This second arrow is the mind's reaction to the pain. It is the story that is told about the first arrow. It is the torrent of thoughts. Why me? This shouldn't be happening. This is terrible. I can't stand it. Whose fault is this? Every one of these thoughts is another twist of that second arrow, driving the initial wound deeper, adding a potent poison of mental and emotional anguish. The wise person, the Buddha taught, still feels the full pain of the first arrow. They do not deny it or pretend it isn't there, but they have trained their mind so that they do not automatically reach for and fire the second. This is the crucial distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is the raw sensory and emotional data of life. It is the clean, unavoidable hurt of the first arrow. Suffering is the secondary layer of mental narrative, resistance, and emotional turmoil that we add on top of our pain. Suffering is the second arrow, and it is almost entirely self-inflicted. It is the difference between feeling the sharp grief of a loss and adding the story, "I will be alone forever and my life is meaningless." It is the difference between feeling the physical pain of an illness and adding the narrative, "My body has betrayed me and my future is ruined." The first arrow is a fact of reality. The second arrow is a product of an untrained mind reacting against reality. All the great spiritual paths in their own language are designed to teach one thing: how to feel the sting of the first arrow without firing the second. This is not a practice of becoming numb or passionless. It is the opposite. It is the practice of becoming so exquisitely present, so radically open to the truth of the moment, that you can allow pain to be just pain, without layering a story of suffering on top of it. It is to shift your life's work from the impossible task of avoiding all of life's arrows to the possible and liberating work of training yourself not to add to your own wounds. You have been hit by many first arrows in your life. It is the nature of your journey. And, like everyone, you have become a master archer of the second. Think of a recent time you felt hurt, perhaps a professional setback. The first arrow was the reality of the situation, the lost contract, the negative review. It carried a genuine sting of disappointment. But then came the volley of second arrows, fired from your own mind. "I am a failure. I'll never succeed. I'm not good enough. They were right to doubt me." See how this transforms a simple, painful event into a deep and personal story of suffering and shame. Consider a conflict in a relationship. Your partner says something that hurts you. The first arrow is the sting of their words. The second arrows are the instantaneous narrative. "They don't respect me. They always do this. This relationship is doomed. I'm not loved." Notice how this second arrow takes a specific moment of pain and expands it into a global, catastrophic story. The practice of wisdom is to create a space after the first arrow strikes. In this space, you simply acknowledge the clean pain. That hurt. You breathe with it. You allow the raw sensation to be there without immediately creating a narrative around it. You feel the sting without reaching into your quiver. This is an act of profound self-compassion. It is the choice to stop participating in your own suffering. It is to meet your pain with presence, not with resistance, and in doing so, to finally give the original wound the air and the space it needs to actually begin to heal. To understand the origin of the second arrow, we must ask a tender question. Who is the archer? Who, within the vast landscape of the self, is so quick to react with such overwhelming fear, such profound grief, such bottomless despair? To find this archer, we must travel inward, past the noise of the daily mind to a quiet temple that stands at the very center of your being. Within this temple lives a figure of immense wisdom and calm, your adult self. But deep inside, in a room that is often kept locked and ignored, lives someone else. There is a story told of a great Zen master who was so serene that people would travel for weeks just to sit in his presence. But as they sat with him in the deep silence of the meditation hall, many of the visitors would hear a strange sound, the faint, muffled sobbing of a small child, seeming to come from the depths of the temple itself. They would try to ignore it, focusing on the master's peaceful demeanor, yet the sound was undeniably there, a thin thread of sorrow weaving through the tranquility. One day a disciple finally gathered the courage to ask, "Master," he whispered, "forgive me, but I often hear a child crying in the temple. Who is it, and why is it so sad?" The old master's face softened with a look of infinite compassion. He did not point to a distant room. He placed a hand over his own heart. "For many years," he said, "I also tried to ignore the sound. I locked that child away, believing its cries were an obstacle to my enlightenment. I thought if I just meditated harder, the sound would go away. But my peace was fragile, built on the denial of that sorrow." The master looked at the disciple, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "My true practice did not begin when I learned to silence my thoughts. It began when I finally unlocked that door, sat down on the floor with that terrified little boy, and listened. That child is me, as I once was, frightened, lonely, and unseen. My only work now is to stay with him, to hold him, and to convince him, finally, that he is safe and loved. Within you too lives this child. This is the psychological truth known as the inner child. It is not a memory, but a living, breathing part of your nervous system. It is the repository of your earliest experiences, not just the facts of what happened, but the powerful emotions a child felt. It holds the wonder and joy, but it also carries the unhealed wounds, the unmet needs for safety and love, and the profound, often mistaken, conclusions a small mind drew about the world. If I am not perfect, I will be abandoned. My needs are a burden to others. Anger is dangerous. I'm on my own. This inner child is not rational. It does not understand time. It lives in a permanent present of pure feeling. And when an event in your adult life today even vaguely resembles the emotional signature of an old wound, this child takes over. This is the mechanism of being triggered. Your boss offers some mild criticism, and suddenly you are not a capable adult. You are a terrified 5-year-old, drowning in a tidal wave of shame, certain you will be cast out. Your partner needs some time alone, and you are not a loving partner. You are an inconsolable infant, gripped by the primal terror of abandonment. The overwhelming, outsized emotional reaction, the one that feels far bigger than the current situation warrants, this is the cry of the inner child from behind its locked door. The second arrow of catastrophic thinking is its native tongue. You have a child within you, and for most of your life you have been taught to do what the young monk did, to ignore the crying, to lock the door, to believe that being an adult means silencing that young, vulnerable part of yourself. But all this does is leave a frightened child in charge of the most powerful bow and arrow in your arsenal. The practice of healing is the practice of becoming the wise master for yourself. It is the work of compassionate we-parenting. When you next feel a surge of overwhelming emotion, that flash of rage, that pit of anxiety, that wave of despair, the invitation is to pause. Instead of reacting outward, turn your attention inward. Go to that quiet room in the temple of your being. See that small child there, crying in the corner. Go and sit with them. In your mind, you can ask, what are you so afraid of right now? And then you can offer that child the words they have been waiting a lifetime to hear from you. I am here. You are not alone. Your feelings make sense. This is scary, but I am the adult now, and I will keep us safe. I will not leave you. This is not a metaphor. This is a real neurological process of soothing the oldest, most vulnerable parts of your brain with the wisdom of your prefrontal cortex. True adulthood is not about banishing the child. It is the courageous act of turning toward them, of integrating them, of becoming the loving parent you always needed. This is how the crying from behind the door finally, gently, begins to fade. When we become the wise and loving parent to our own inner child, we begin to heal the part of us that looks to the world for a verdict on its own worth. The incessant need for approval begins to soften. The terror of disapproval begins to lose its sting. This healing allows us to step out of the locked room of our own fear and learn to walk through the great, noisy marketplace of human opinion with a new and unshakable grace.
Imagine a wise old master walking with his disciple through the central market of a bustling city. The air is thick with the scent of spices and dust, and the noise is a deafening symphony of life. A silk merchant, seeing the master's simple robes, bows low and praises his profound wisdom, hoping to gain favor. A few stalls down, a disgruntled man, bitter with his own misfortunes, recognizes the master and shouts a crude insult about his bald head. A group of children point and giggle. A beggar clutches at his sleeve, pleading for a coin. The disciple, walking beside his teacher, feels himself pulled in a dozen different directions. He feels a flush of pride at the merchant's praise, a surge of protective anger at the insult, the wave of pity for the beggar. His inner world is a turbulent sea, tossed by the changing winds of the market. But the master walks on, his pace unhurried, a gentle, barely perceptible smile on his lips. He sees everything, hears everything, but is attached to none of it. He is a calm river flowing through the chaotic landscape. Later, in the quiet of their temple, the disciple asks, "Master, how do you do it? How do you remain so serene? The praise did not make you proud, and the insult did not make you angry. It is as if you are made of stone." The master poured 2 cups of tea. "I heard their words," he said, "but their words are not mine to keep. The man who praised me was speaking of his own idea of wisdom. The man who insulted me was speaking from his own pain. They hold up their opinions like goods for sale. I am simply not a customer." This is the secret to navigating the world. Your life is this marketplace. From the moment you are born, you are surrounded by the shouting of vendors. These vendors are your parents, your teachers, your friends, your colleagues, and now the countless strangers on the internet. And the goods they are selling are their judgments, their expectations, their praise, and their blame. The untrained mind is a frantic and impoverished shopper in this market. It believes its survival depends on collecting as much praise as possible and avoiding any hint of criticism. A kind word from a vendor can make its whole day feel sunny. A harsh word can plunge it into a dark and stormy night. This person's sense of self-worth is not their own. It is a fragile thing, cobbled together from the fleeting opinions of the crowd. It is for sale every day to the highest or loudest bidder. The path of wisdom is the path of equanimity. It is the journey of cultivating an inner center of gravity so solid that the chaotic winds of the marketplace cannot move you. It is the profound realization that your true worth is not a commodity. It cannot be increased by 1,000 likes or diminished by 1,000 criticisms. It is the bedrock beneath the market square, unseen, unmoving, and utterly whole, regardless of the chaos unfolding above. Your phone is a marketplace you hold in the palm of your hand.
It is the most concentrated and volatile market ever created. Each time you post a thought or a picture, you are setting up your stall. Then you wait, holding your breath as the faceless crowd passes by. A like is a sweet fruit, a hit of validation that brings a moment of relief. A negative comment is a stone thrown from the crowd, and it stings. Your nervous system is taken on a wild ride, operated by the whims of people you will never meet. The practice of the wise master is to see this for what it is. It is the noise of the market. It is not a verdict on your soul. You can observe the praise without becoming inflated by it. You can observe the criticism without being crushed by it. They are just the words of the vendors, and you are free to not be a customer. This applies to all the markets of your life. The expectations of your family are the calls of the merchants who have known you the longest. You can listen with love, but you do not have to buy the goods they are selling if they are not right for you. The desire for a boss's approval, the fear of a colleague's judgment, these are the pressures of the professional bazaar. You can find freedom by anchoring yourself not in their shifting opinions, but in the quiet integrity of your own work. You do not have to leave the world to find peace. You simply have to realize that you are not a shopper desperately seeking validation. You are the owner of the entire marketplace of your own being. You can walk through the noise, at peace, knowing that you already possess the only thing of any real value. To find freedom in the marketplace of opinion is a great step, but a subtle trap remains for the seeker of peace. The mind, having learned not to purchase the judgments of others, can become a collector of another kind of good, spiritual concepts. It can turn the very teachings of liberation into a new set of possessions for the ego. It can fall in love with the signposts and completely forget the destination. This is the danger illustrated by one of the most vital Zen teachings. On a clear night, with a full moon hanging in the sky like a pall, a master sat with his student. The master, wishing to transmit the wonder of the moment, did not speak. He simply raised his hand and pointed a long, steady finger toward the luminous orb. "Look," he whispered. The student, filled with devotion and a desire to understand, leaned forward and stared with unwavering concentration at the master's finger. He studied its every detail, the lines on the knuckle, the shape of the nail, the way the moonlight illuminated its tip. He was memorizing the pointer, believing the secret was contained within it. After a long moment of this misplaced focus, the master sighed, a sound as soft as the night air. "My finger," he said gently, "is only here to show you the moon. If you continue to stare at my finger, you will miss all of heaven's glory." This is the essential warning for any journey inward. Every word you have heard here tonight, every spiritual book you have ever read, every philosophy you have studied, every teacher you have admired, they are all, without exception, fingers pointing at the moon. They are not the moon itself. The moon is the direct, living, non-verbal experience of presence, of stillness, of the boundless reality of your own being. It cannot be captured by language. It cannot be held by a concept. It can only be known through direct perception. The intellect, the part of the mind that thrives on analysis and categorization, has a powerful tendency to become obsessed with the finger. It loves to collect spiritual terminology. It learns to speak fluently about the ego, non-attachment, shadow work, and equanimity. The ego can become very proud of its collection. It displays its concepts like rare jewels, using them to feel special, more advanced, more spiritual than others.
This is the great trap of intellectual bypassing. A person can have a mind filled with the most beautiful and elaborate maps of inner peace, yet live their entire life in a state of anxious turmoil. They have become an expert on the menu, but they have never once tasted the food. They have mistaken the knowledge about the path for the experience of walking the path.
You live in an age saturated with fingers. There has never been a time with more access to spiritual information. An endless stream of podcasts, books, videos, and workshops point in 1,000 different directions. The mind can feast on this information, becoming bloated with theories and quotes. Yet the heart can remain starved for true nourishment. You can use these concepts as a sophisticated way to avoid your own life. When grief arises, you can hold up the finger of non-attachment to keep the raw feeling at bay. When you act out of anger, you can dismiss it with the finger of "that's just my ego," avoiding the difficult work of self-reflection. This is using the teaching as a shield rather than a guide. The true practice is always an invitation to put the finger down and look where it is pointing. It is the courage to stop reading about the breath and to actually feel the sensation of air entering your nostrils and filling your lungs. That feeling, right now, is the moon. It is the choice to stop listening to a guided meditation about silence and to simply notice the quiet space between your thoughts, the stillness that is holding these very words. That silence is the moon. It is the willingness to feel the raw, unnamed energy of an emotion in your body before the mind rushes in to label it and create a story around it. That raw sensation is the moon. The map is not the territory. The finger is not the celestial light. The concept of water will never quench your thirst. Your direct, unfiltered, moment-to-moment experience is the only truth there is. The pointers are useful only in that they direct your gaze. Once your gaze has been turned inward, their job is done. Trust the quiet, unfolding reality of your own senses more than any idea you have ever been taught. The greatest wisdom is not found in the cleverness of the mind, but in the silent, knowing stillness of your own heart. To mistake the finger for the moon is the error of the intellect. To look at the moon itself is to have a direct experience of light in the darkness. And to have this experience even once is to discover that you carry a source of this light within you. It is to find that even when the world outside is a storm of chaos, you can retreat to a place of unshakable peace and absolute security. The great Stoic philosophers of Rome had a name for this place. They called it the inner citadel. The most powerful testament to this inner fortress comes not from a philosopher who wrote in peaceful seclusion, but from a man who stood at the very center of the world's chaos. The Roman Emperor, Marcus Aurelius. Picture this man not in a serene marble hall, but in a windswept tent on the dark northern frontier of his empire. For years he was at war, commanding legions against invading tribes. Back in Rome, a deadly plague was emptying his cities. Political treachery was a constant threat, and his personal life was marked by the profound grief of losing his beloved wife and 8 of his 13 children. He was arguably the most powerful man in the world,
Yet he was besieged on all sides by forces far beyond his control. And yet, each night, after a day of managing this immense turmoil, he would light a single oil lamp, open a simple leather-bound journal, and he would retreat. He would withdraw from the roles of emperor, general, and grieving father, and enter the quiet, orderly, and impregnable fortress of his own mind. In this inner citadel, he would remind himself of the great truths, what he could control and what he could not. He would look upon the day's chaos as a storm outside his high walls. He would realign himself with his own reason, his own virtue, his own unshakable core. This nightly retreat was not an escape from his duties. It was the very source of his strength to perform them.
This inner citadel is not the privilege of an emperor. It is the birthright of every human being. It is the innermost sanctum of your own consciousness, a place that no external event, no person, and no misfortune can ever violate. The world can lay siege to you. It can batter you with financial hardship, with relationship turmoil, with sickness and with loss. It can scream insults at the outer walls, but it cannot force its way inside. The quiet courtyard of your citadel, the place where your core self resides, remains untouched, unless you, its sole commander, choose to open the gates and let the chaos in. Most people live with the gates of their citadel wide open. Every passing opinion, every piece of bad news, every stray emotion is allowed to wander in, occupy the command center, and create havoc. A person's inner state becomes a reflection of the outer world's disorder. The practice of the Stoic is the practice of learning to guard the gates.
The walls of your fortress are built and reinforced by the principles of wisdom. Every time you remember to distinguish what you can and cannot control, you add another stone to the wall. Every time you see the empty boat in another's hurtful action, you strengthen the ramparts. Every time you choose not to fire the second arrow, you are training the sentries that guard your peace. You possess this fortress at this very moment. Its quiet corridors and unbreachable walls are always here, waiting for you, beneath the noise of your thinking mind. In the modern world, you are constantly besieged. The barrage of notifications, the relentless pressure to perform, the weight of global and personal anxieties can make you feel as though there is no safe harbor, no place to rest. You may believe that peace is something you must travel to, a vacation, a retreat, a quiet weekend. But the Emperor teaches us that the retreat is inward, and it is available in an instant. This is the practice of the Stoic pause. You can be in the middle of a stressful workday, feeling overwhelmed by emails and deadlines. For the length of a single conscious breath, you can retreat to your citadel. You close your inner gates to the noise, and for a second, you stand in the quiet courtyard. You reconnect with the calm, observing you. You remember that the chaos is outside, and that inside you are safe and free to choose your next move. You can be in a difficult conversation, feeling the sting of the first arrow. Before you react, before you fire the second, you retreat. You step back into your fortress, observe the situation from the high wall, and choose a response from a place of clarity and strength, not from the battlefield of raw emotion,
This is not about suppressing feelings. It is about creating a space where you are not ruled by them, no matter how turbulent the ocean of your life becomes. You have a deep and silent harbor you can steer into at any moment. You are not a helpless vessel tossed on the waves. You are the commander of a mighty fortress, the sovereign ruler of your own inner world. From the unshakable ground of the inner citadel, one can finally gaze out upon the world not with fear, but with a clear and steady eye. And what one sees from this high wall is the deepest truth of existence, a law to which even emperors and empires must bow. Everything flows, everything changes. To find peace with this truth is to learn the art of letting the old tree fall. In the heart of an ancient forest stood a tree so vast and old that the forest itself was named for it. Its branches were a map of the centuries, and its roots held the stories of generations. It was the landmark, the constant, the sacred center of the woods. Then, one season, a storm of tremendous power swept through the land. Wind and lightning tore at the forest, and the great tree was struck. A deep, fatal wound was carved into its trunk. For a time it remained standing, a noble silhouette against the sky. But its leaves began to wither, its life force slowly draining back into the earth. The people who lived nearby felt the tree's slow death as a personal loss. Their hearts were filled with grief and a kind of resistance. They spoke of building great scaffolds to prop it up, of wrapping its trunk in iron bands to hold it together, to deny the inevitable. They could not imagine the forest without it. But a wise old woman of the village, who had learned her wisdom from the forest itself, led them to the dying tree. She did not speak of holding on. She pointed to the forest floor, rich with the decay of 1,000 autumns. This tree's life has been a gift, she said, her voice quiet as falling leaves. And its death is a gift as well. To fight its falling is to fight the future of the whole forest. When it finally lets go, its great body will open the sky. New light will reach seedlings that have waited years in shadow. Its trunk will become a universe of new life, and its decay will feed the roots of 100 new trees. Its final act of generosity is to make way. Our job is not to hold it up. Our job is to let it go. This is the great teaching of impermanence. It is the fundamental law of the cosmos that nothing is fixed. Everything that arises must, in time, pass away. Your body, your relationships, your career, your identity. This very moment of quiet listening, all are like the tree. They have their season to grow and flourish, and they have their season to fall and transform into something new. Suffering is born from the refusal to accept this law. It is the human attempt to build a scaffold around a dying tree. We cling to moments of pleasure, trying to freeze them in time. We cling to old identities, refusing to see that the season has changed. We resist the reality of loss, believing that our fierce grip can hold back the turning of the world. This struggle against the current of reality is the source of all exhaustion, all bitterness, all prolonged grief. The art of letting go is the highest wisdom. It is not an act of weakness or resignation.
but an act of profound courage and alignment with truth. It is the choice to trust the rhythm of life itself. It is the understanding that every falling tree is not an ending, but a vital part of a sacred cycle. Every closure creates an opening. Every death provides the nourishment for a new birth. Your life is this forest, and within it there are trees that are ready to fall. There may be the great tree of a relationship that has run its course. You can feel that its life force is gone, yet you keep propping it up out of fear of the empty space it will leave behind. To let it fall is to finally allow the light in for both of you, to create the space for new growth. There is the tree of an old identity, the person you used to be, the career you once had. Clinging to its dead branches prevents you from discovering the person you are becoming now. Letting go of that old self is not a betrayal. It is a necessary clearing for the next stage of your life's journey. There is the tree of a past you cannot change, a mistake or a wound you keep alive by resisting it. To let it fall is to accept what is, and to allow its lessons to become the fertile soil for a wiser present. The practice is to walk through your inner forest with the gentle eyes of the old woman. To ask with compassion, what am I propping up that is asking to be released? What old structures are blocking the light? To let go is not to forget. It is to release the struggle. It is to trust that the clearing in the forest is not a terrifying void, but a place of sacred potential, waiting for the sun. True strength is not found in how tightly you can hold on, but in how gracefully you can let go. To see the falling tree become the soil, and the soil become the new sapling, is to witness the seamless dance of life. It is to glimpse the great secret that underlies all of existence, that nothing is truly separate from anything else. This understanding leads us from the forest floor to the vast shoreline, to contemplate the final and most liberating wisdom, the wisdom of the great ocean. Consider a single wave rising from the deep. It forms a unique identity for a brief time. It has a shape, a height, a speed, a powerful crest of white foam. From its own perspective, it is a singular thing, an individual on a great journey. It might look at the other waves and feel a sense of pride in its size, or a sense of fear about the smaller waves chasing it from behind. It sees the distant shore as its final destination, a place where it will meet its end. And the thought of this crashing finale fills it with a kind of anxiety. Its entire existence is defined by its sense of being a separate, traveling wave. Then, the moment comes. The wave reaches the sand, curls upon itself and dissolves into a million shimmering droplets. From the wave's limited perspective, this is death, oblivion, the end of everything it has ever known. But from the perspective of the ocean, nothing of any substance has been lost. The wave was never, for a single moment, separate from the ocean. Its form was a temporary expression of the ocean. Its power was the ocean's power. Its very substance was the ocean's water. The wave's death was not an end at all. It was a homecoming. It was the release of a temporary illusion and the return to the boundless, timeless truth of what it had always been. This is the story of the human self, the small, separate ego with its name, its history, its ambitions and its fears, is the wave.
It spends its life reinforcing its sense of separateness, and it lives in constant, low-grade terror of its own dissolution. This is the root of the deepest human anxieties. The great Zen masters called the truth of this situation sunyata, or emptiness. This is a word that is easily misunderstood. Emptiness does not mean nothingness or a cold, dead void. It means empty of a separate, independent and permanent self. It is the teaching of radical, indivisible wholeness. A flower is empty of a separate self because it is entirely full of things that are not the flower. It is full of sunlight, of rain clouds, of earth, and of the work of the bee. If you take away all these non-flower elements, there is no flower left. In the same way, you are empty of a separate self. Look at yourself.
The body you inhabit is woven from the food you have eaten, the water you have drunk, the air you are breathing this very second. The thoughts and language you use to define yourself were given to you by your culture, your family, your education. The very atoms that make up your form were forged in the hearts of stars that died billions of years ago. You are not a separate entity in the universe. You are the universe, expressing itself as a human for a little while. The separate self is not a solid thing, but a temporary pattern, a beautiful, fleeting wave on the surface of an infinite ocean.
To realize this is not to lose yourself. It is to find what you truly are. You have lived your life believing you are only the wave, and this belief is the source of the profound pain of loneliness and alienation. It is the feeling of being a small, fragile me struggling against a vast and indifferent world. The practice of wisdom is to gently dissolve this illusion. When you feel a pang of loneliness, the invitation is to remember your connection. Feel your breath. This breath is not your breath. It is the atmosphere, the great shared respiration of the planet moving through you. You are connected to every tree, every animal, every other person with each inhalation and exhalation. When you feel the fear of failure or the terror of your own end, the practice is to shift your identity from the fragile wave to the eternal ocean. The wave can fail, the wave will certainly dissolve, but the ocean cannot. Your true nature, the vast ocean of consciousness, is unborn and undying. It simply changes form. When this truth is felt, not just understood, a profound peace is born. The frantic need to protect and promote the little wave self begins to soften. A deep compassion arises naturally, for you see the other waves not as competitors, but as fellow expressions of the same great water. Their suffering is your suffering. Their joy is your joy. The peace you have been seeking is not found by making your wave bigger, stronger, or more perfect. It is found in the simple, restful, and liberating surrender into the boundless truth of who you have always been, the entire, majestic, and undivided ocean. And so, the great ocean settles. The wave has returned to the water, and the water is calm. This vast oceanic peace does not live in a distant cosmos or a far-off spiritual realm. It lives here, in the quiet, ordinary and sacred room of your own being. The long journey outward into the world of noise is complete, and now begins the final, simple journey inward to the home you never truly left. The great marketplace of opinions has closed for the night. The vendors of praise and blame have packed up their stalls and gone to their own homes. There is no one left to impress, no one from whom you need to win approval. The desire to be seen, to be validated, to be understood by another, all of it can be set down now. In this silence, Your own worth is not in question. It is a simple, glowing fact, like a lantern left burning in an empty square. The river of your thoughts, once a raging torrent, now flows with a slow and gentle current under a sky of soft moonlight. You are sitting on the bank, untroubled by the leaves and branches that drift by. A memory floats past, but you do not need to follow it. A plan for tomorrow appears, but you do not need to grasp it.
You are the quiet, abiding witness, resting on the shore of your own mind, at peace with its gentle, endless flowing. The gates to your inner citadel are closed and secure. The sentries are at ease. The storms of the world may rage outside, the winds of change may howl, but here, in the central courtyard of your being, all is still. You are safe. No harm can reach you here. This is your sovereign ground, your unbreachable fortress of peace. Let the feeling of this deep security permeate your entire body. Let your muscles unclench from their state of constant vigilance. Let your jaw soften. Let your shoulders release the unseen glass they have been holding for so long. There is nothing to brace against, nothing to defend. You are home and you are safe. In the center of this quiet fortress, on a simple wooden table, sits a teacup. It is traced with lines of shimmering gold. You can look now upon your own life, your own history, with this same gentle reverence. The cracks of past heartbreaks, the lines of old failures are not ugly scars to be hidden. They are the beautiful, unique map of your survival. They are the places where the light got in. Tonight, there is no shame. There is only a quiet, loving acceptance of the beautiful, broken, and mended vessel that you are. And deep within the temple of your being, the small child is finally asleep. The crying has ceased. You, the wise and loving adult, have come to them. You have listened to their fears and held them close. You have assured them that they will never be abandoned, that they are unconditionally loved. Now they are resting in that safety, curled up in the quietest part of your heart. Feel their peace. Their peace is your peace. The old anxieties, the deep-seated fears of abandonment and unworthiness can all be allowed to sleep as well. You are the gentle guardian of your own vulnerability. The great work is done. All that is left is to rest. There is nothing to figure out. There is nowhere you need to go. There is no one you need to become. The tree that needed to fall has fallen. The wave that needed to crash has returned to the sea. All that you have been striving for, all that you have been seeking, is already here, in this simple, breathing moment. Allow yourself to sink into it, to dissolve into the quiet, into the darkness, into the profound and effortless peace of your own true nature. Let go. The stillness you are searching for is the stillness that you are.